Hello mathematicians. Today's video we're going to start to make equations from slopes and y-intercepts. So our objective for the day is students will be able to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form given the slope and the y-intercept. Take a minute and pause the video if you need to copy down the objective and then press play when you're ready. So the first thing we're going to do today is get some vocabulary out of the way. We're going to be learning a lot of new words today, mainly among those the words linear, slope, and y-intercept. So the word linear, right? A linear line is a straight line. A straight line, okay? This straight line also has a constant slope or rate of change. So a linear line is a straight line with a constant slope or rate of change. Now we are familiar with the word slope. We know slope is rise over run. We know slope is a constant rate of change. So a linear line is just a straight line. Now I'm drawing this by hand, so give me a little bit of leeway. Okay, a straight line. Right, that's a linear line. If we were to pick points, right, and find our slope, we would find that it has a constant slope. That means that it's a linear line. It has a constant rate of change. Just to give you a couple of quick examples of things that are not linear lines, something like this. This is actually a quadratic, right? This could be considered not a linear line because it's not a straight line with a constant rate of change. Something like this. Okay, this is actually an absolute value equation. This is also not a linear line because it does not have a constant rate of change. The next word we are familiar with, and that is slope. We know slope is the rate of change. Slope is the rate of change. Okay. Now let's write out the other things we know about slope. We've learned two different ways to find slope, and we also learned that there's a letter that represents slope. We know that slope is M, right? And we know slope is rise over run. And we also can use our formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? So either of those work. And then lastly, the y-intercept. The y-intercept we've talked a little bit about, but the y-intercept is the y-coordinate of an ordered pair where a line crosses the y-axis. The y-coordinate of an ordered pair where a line crosses the y-axis. So if we're looking at this line that I just drew, the y-coordinate where it crosses would be right here. That's the y-intercept. We use the letter B to represent the y-intercept, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, take a minute and pause the video if you need to, just to make sure you don't need any of this information. Okay, so let's go through the formula itself. So we're talking today about slope-intercept form. There are different ways of writing an equation of a linear line. Slope-intercept form is one way to write that equation. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Okay, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The y is always on the left. So the y is always on the left. in slope-intercept form, and it stands for all y values. So if you have a point, okay, that can be a y value. The next one is m, right? We are familiar with m. We know m stands for the slope. Okay, remember slope is our rate of change. Okay, slope is just our rate of change. The next one is b. B is a new one for us. B stands for the y-intercept. The y-intercept, or the place where the line crosses the y-axis. So it's where the line crosses the y-axis. And then lastly, x and y. The x and the y are going to be our points that are on our line, our ordered pair. So I'm going to say a ordered pair on the line. So what I mean by ordered pair is you could have something like x comma y, or you could have something like 3 comma 2. Okay, those are what I mean by ordered pair. Okay, what I would like you to do right now is we're going to do a little bit of practice, just to kind of get us warmed up and remind us a couple of things before we start. So I want you to answer these first questions, question 1 and question 2. It says, find the slope of a line, given that the following points are on the line. So go ahead, pause the video. This should be a little bit of a review for you, and find the slope of these two lines. Alright, so the slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we should have labeled our points x1, y1, x2, y2, and then you could have just plugged them in. Remember that we should be using parentheses to plug things in. So y2 was -3, y1 was 5, x2 was 4, x1 was 3. -3 minus 5 is a -8. Oop, then I forgot to put a minus here. And 4 minus 3 is 1. If I simplify that, for this first one, you should have had that m equals -8. For number 2, I'm not going to go through how to set it up, but you should have had that m equals 2. If you had trouble with this, please go back and watch the video on finding slope from an equation, or make sure that you come in and get some help before we move on. Alright, I want you to do a little bit of review. So I want you to do some of these questions just to remind yourself. I want you to do these questions all the way up to the end of this page. So finish this page, pause the video, and press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, for this first one, the first line you should have said that this was a positive slope. When you look at this question from left to right, the line is going up from left to right. Look at it just so you can see it, right? We're going up from left to right. This next one, you should have said negative. It's going down from left to right. So it's a negative line. Down here, which ordered pair is on the x-axis? Remember, if it's on the x-axis, that means that the y value of the point is 0. So you should have put B. If you picked A, I want you to remember that this is actually on the y-axis. Okay, because in order for a point to be on the x-axis, it needs to have a y value of 0. Which of the following points is on the y-axis? Would be A. And then finally, which formula correctly shows the slope-intercept form? You should have picked D. Let's get started on our objective for today. We've gotten to do a little bit of review, gotten to know some new vocabulary words. Now we're going to get into the actual objective. So we're talking today about writing an equation in slope-intercept form. First thing I want to talk to you about is what two things you need to write an equation in slope-intercept form. Right? And those two things you need are the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, that is why it's called slope-intercept form. Now, we can find our slope and our intercept a couple of different ways. Okay, it could be given to us. We could find it from an equation, meaning we look at an equation, we find it. We could find it from a graph, or we could find it from a formula, right? So remember, we find slope a different ways. Y-intercept the same. We could find the y-intercept from a point. We could find the y-intercept from a graph. We could look at a graph and find it. We could find the y-intercept by just looking and seeing that it's given. Or we could also find the y-intercept from an equation. So I want you to keep in mind that it's not always a straightforward way of finding the slope and the y-intercept. Sometimes we have to do a little bit of work. Now, a key point, the slope, when we write slope or when we write n, the slope must be written as a fraction. Must be written as a fraction. It is not typically written as a mixed number. A mixed number, what I mean by that is something like 1/2 or 3 1/3. And it is also not typically written as a decimal. Okay, something like 0.2. And I'll show you in a minute why that is. So the slope must be written as a fraction, or, actually let's add this up here, a fraction or a whole number. Okay, either one is fine, a fraction or a whole number. So when it is a fraction, if it can't be a mixed number, it's going to be an improper fraction or a proper fraction. The y-intercept is not an if the y-intercept is not an integer, remember, and by integer we mean a whole number. If the y-intercept is not an integer, it is best to write it as a fraction. Okay? And when I say fraction, I mean you can either write it as a mixed number or a proper. Okay? A mixed number or a proper. If you wanted to, you could write as a decimal, but usually it's best to write it as a fraction. All right, let me just give you some examples of why we write things this way. Let's say that we have an equation like y equals 2/3 x plus 2.5. Okay, if I want to graph this, what I do is I say, okay, here's my y-intercept. I'm going to go to 2.5 on my graph. And then my slope is 2/3, which means I go up 2 and over 3. So I'm going to go up 2/3. Up 2/3, right? That's a little bit easy to graph because I have my slope already in rise over run, and my y-intercept is as 2/5. I'm going to give you another example. Let's say I said y equals 3 1/3 x plus 7/4. If I went to go and graph this would be kind of hard. And the reason would be is, first of all, my y-intercept says 7/4. I have no idea where that would be on the graph. I would have to kind of reduce that and figure out where it would be as a decimal, because I don't know what 7/4 is, where I'd put that on my y. And then 3 1/3, I don't know how much I'm rising and how much I'm running. So I'd have to take this and change it into a fraction anyways, so that I can figure out how much do I run and how much do I rise. Right? So that's why we put them the way we put them. Okay, let's go over some examples. We're talking about writing the slope-intercept equation in writing an equation of a line in slope-intercept form given the slope and the y-intercept. So, 3 1/3 x plus 7/4. If I want to graph this, what I do is I say, okay, here's my y-intercept. I'm going to go to 2.5 on my graph. And then my slope is 2/3, which means I go up 2 and over 3. So I'm going to go up 2/3. Up 2/3. example 1 says, write the equation of a line, okay, given a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of 4. Okay, the equation of the line. So I know that my equation is y equals mx plus b. Given a slope of 3, so I know that slope is m, so the slope is 3. And I know that the y-intercept is 4, so b is 4. So all I'm going to do to write the equation of a line is say, okay, y equals my m, which is 3, so 3x, the y and the x stay, a y-intercept of 4 plus 4. So what I did is I put the 3 in for m and the 4 in for b. So my answer is y equals 3x plus 4. Alright, let's do another one. Write the equation of a line given that m is a half and b is negative 5. So I know that the equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to substitute. Right? Y equals m, which is 1/2. I'm going to put my x. Y equals 1/2 x. And then we have minus negative 5. Now, this equation says plus b, but we don't want to put plus negative 5, right? Adding a negative is the same as subtracting. So whenever you have a negative b, you can just write minus the b, so minus 5. So my equation is y equals 1/2 x minus 5. All right, one more. Write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, giving a b of negative 1 and an m of 0. So my equation of a line, and I keep writing the equation of a line, and you should as well, because the more times you write something, the more likely it is that you're going to remember it, and you want to use that as a reference. So y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to plug in my m and my b. So y equals an m of 0, x, minus a negative 1 is our b, so I'm going to put minus 1. Now, whenever you have something like 0x, we've talked about this before. I'm going to do a little example over here. If you have something like 0x, 0 times anything is going to be 0. So no matter what number we put in for x, we're always going to be 0. So for example, if I were to put in a 3 for x, 0 times 3 is still 0. And so you don't need to put 0x. We can put just 0, right? So now we just have 0 minus 1. Now, what is 0 minus 1? Well, 0 minus 1 is just negative 1. So when you have a slope of 0, the proper way of writing it is to just take the slope out and you just have the y-intercept. All right, let's go to the next. Okay, so next example, it says given a slope of negative 1, a y-intercept of 0, what is the equation of a line? So I know my equation is y equals mx plus b. It says a slope of negative 1, so my slope is negative 1. A y-intercept of 0, so my b is 0. So I'm going to write up my equation. Y equals a slope of negative 1x plus 0. Now, our y-intercept is 0. Adding 0 to anything isn't going to change the equation, so I'm going to go ahead and simplify this to negative 1x. We don't need to write the 0, so we take the 0 off. Okay, last example, it says write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form with a slope of 0.75 and a y-intercept of 5/2. So my slope is 0.75 and my b is 5/2. Now, before I start, I'm looking at these and I know that I'm not supposed to write slope as a decimal. Slope can only be a proper, an improper fraction, or a whole number. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this decimal into a fraction. Okay, and 3.75 as a fraction would be 3/4. And then I also see that my y-intercept is 5/2. I also know that I can't write the y-intercept as an improper fraction. That would be hard to graph. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Now I can change that into a mixed number or I can change that into a decimal. So I'm going to do both so you can see what both looks like. Okay, I'm going to change this into 2.5 as a decimal, and then as a mixed number, it would be 2.5. So I'm going to write my equation, and my equation is going to be y equals, we have 3/4 x. I can either do plus 2.5 or plus 2.5, so I'll do plus 2.5. I also could have written y equals 3/4 x plus 2 1/2. Either of those are acceptable answers, right? Our goal here is to make it so that it's easy to graph the y-intercept. It's easy to graph the slope. Having it as a 2.5 or having it as a 2.5, either of those are easy ways to graph. Okay, I want you to get in some practice. So what I'm going to have you do is I want you to come down here and I want you to do questions 1 through 9. Go ahead and write the equation of the line for each. Pause the video. When you press play, you can see the answers. All right, number 1, you should have had y equals 5x minus 3. Number 2, you should have had y equals negative 2x plus 7. Number 3, you should have had y equals negative 6x minus 2. Number 3, you have a slope that's a mixed number, so you should have changed it into an improper fraction. So you should have had y equals 7 over 2x plus 1. Number 3, you have a y-intercept that is an improper fraction, so you should have changed it into a mixed number or a decimal. So you could have either had y equals 3x plus 1 1/5, or you could have had y equals 3x plus 1.2. You'll start to notice that in some instances it's easier to graph certain things. I would say that this one is probably a little bit easier to graph. It might be a little bit hard to see where 1/5 is as opposed to maybe a half is. So you'll start to notice you have a preference for certain things when you have certain kinds of numbers. Number 6, you should have had y equals negative 4x. You should not have the plus 0. Number 7, you should have y equals 1x minus 4. You also, and the more proper way of putting this is to not have the x in front, so just have the y equals x minus 4. This one we should have had y equals 8. The b is 0, so you should have not written it. And then lastly, we should have had y equals negative 1x, or again, you could have had y equals negative x and drop the 1. Okay, that is our video for today. Go ahead and write down any questions you may have. Be prepared to come to class ready to practice.